Hello, USask alumni, and welcome, and thank you for being with us tonight for this special virtual alumni event. My name is Chris Unsworth, and I'm the chair of the University of Saskatchewan Alumni Advisory Board, a group that represents you as USask grads. The USask Alumni Advisory Board represents more than 161,000 alumni, and our goal is to bring the world of the alumni together to celebrate and to encourage the success of our graduates and to ensure that you receive a bunch of different special benefits. We've had a great week so far, reconnecting with other USask alumni through some of the events, like our discussion with Dr. Volker Gertz from Vito Intervac, and one of the current world leaders in vaccine development. He was able to provide us with some incredible insight on the search for a COVID-19 vaccine, work that is being completed right here on the U of S campus. We also celebrated hundreds and hundreds of golden grads, alumni who graduated 50 years ago or more from the University of Saskatchewan. And we did that virtually this year. That's a first. You can check out this year's honorees on our website at alumni.usask.ca. Even though we couldn't sit down face-to-face during our alumni week this year, we've had the chance to revisit our campus through some of the virtual tours. I know that I checked out the one of the Canadian Light Source. It was posted on Facebook earlier this week. And we also had fun trivia contests for you to participate in and win some cool prizes. And then finally tonight, we get to visit with Shawn Moen, a USask alumnus who, like us, followed his passions and is now the CEO and co-owner of 9 Mile Legacy Brewing here in Saskatoon. I know I've personally sat in the taproom at 9 Mile and tasted their beer, and it is delightful. Shawn's going to talk a little bit about his time on campus as a law student and how he got to where he is today, running a successful microbrewery. When our alumni week is over, we encourage you to stay in touch through our website and social media channels. Drop us a line, tell us where your journey is taking you. I know as a fellow USask grad that staying in touch with the university has been definitely worthwhile, and I've reconnected with classmates and made new connections and networked with new people. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our moderator for this evening, Leslie Ann Schlosser, the editor of our Green and White magazine. I think that she really has one of the best jobs, and she gets to tell us about some of the other alumni on campus and those that have left who deserve time in the spotlight. With that, I pass you over to Leslie Ann and to Shawn.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chris, for that. Thanks for being here with us tonight, too. So good to see you face-to-face, kind of. So yeah, as Chris mentioned, I'm Leslie Ann Schlosser. I'm the editor of your Green and White Alumni magazine. And coincidentally, I am also a pretty big craft beer enthusiast. So I was very happy to be able to monitor tonight's event with you all. Looks like we have a pretty good turnout coming in. We're seeing a lot of people. I know we had a lot of registrants from across the country and a couple even from outside of the country. So it's just so wonderful to be able to connect with you all in this way. I know this format is a little different than what we're used to, and it's been a long week, lots of back to school stuff, lots of virtual meetings and stuff. So we really, really appreciate you all being here this evening, being able to relax, have a beer, and just have a chat with us tonight. So it means a lot. So in that note, I thought maybe it would be a nice way to start the event if we all had our own little virtual cheers. I know I have mine right here. Been poured for a while, just waiting for me. I think Shawn's gonna come on here too.
You bet. Hi everybody. I was waiting to crack mine, Leslie Ann. I guess I wasn't as keen as you were, but
I was very proactive, yes.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thanks so much for joining us tonight, everybody. I know it's a Friday afternoon, and if it's anything like Saskatoon, it's just the weather's gorgeous. So we really appreciate you joining us, and we'll have a fun chat about what it's like to start a brewery after a number of years.
Absolutely. So yeah, everybody, I don't know, we can't really see you, but I'm assuming we can just raise a glass, chink.
Cheers.
Cheers. That's good. A good way to start a Friday. I also just like to thank our University Relations Advancements Office, who helped us out. Everybody who was an early registrant received a free beer courtesy of us and 9 Miles, so that was great to see. I'll just do a little bit of housekeeping here before we get started, like a regular in-person event, but virtual. We wanted to make this as interactive as possible, so we've opened the chat function on the side for you this evening. We want you to be able to, as you're listening, send us a question or two if you have them. I think everybody on a laptop will have that on the right-hand panel. If you want to say something, you can just press 2, all panelists, and we'll receive it on our end. And then for those of you who are on phone, I think there's just a little bar at the bottom. You can swipe up and get that chat function. We're also going to be doing some polls throughout the evening as well to kind of keep things interactive. Like I mentioned, we do have a lot of attendees here tonight, and we're interested to see what USask colleges you all came from. So we're going to be opening a poll. I think there it is. Perfect. Look at that cue. So you can see them all there. I think we got them all, but I think we did one at the bottom. If your college was renamed or doesn't exist anymore, feel free to let us know. So we'll revisit those results later. And I first just want to give you a quick little intro, Shawn, before we start chatting officially. I met you, I think, 2 years ago when we did our green and white interview. And I think that was the first time I actually walked into your tap room. I've heard so much about it. Being a Saskatoon girl, everybody said, get to 9 Mile, get to 9 Mile. So I was finally there. And as soon as I walked into the room, I could tell it was just a very special place where people could come together, and it's very community-minded. And I think we were going to chat about a specific barley you were using in one of your beers.
Yeah, the bull barley bred by Aaron Beatty over at the CDC at the U of S as well. So it was a pretty special project.
Right, yeah. So it all kind of came together, and I think within our chat we were talking, and then all of a sudden we started talking about who you were and how you went to school to be a lawyer, and now you're where you were. And I walked away from the interview just thinking, like, wow, like what a remarkable story, what an inspiring person, what a humble guy, and you were basically everything that a USask alumni embodies. So I think that people are going to leave tonight with that same sentiment, because you really do have a really great story to tell. College of Law alumnus from 2005. I don't want to get too much into your bio because we're going to probably chat a little bit about it. So why don't we just jump right on in? And I can start with my first question here tonight is, just tell us a little bit about your history from,
Sure.
USask student into what you're doing today.
Oh, it feels like a long time ago, and I guess it was. I graduated from Cabri High School down in the southwest corner of the province. I'm a farm boy. My folks are still farming down there. I was really proud to be able to take my little boy Pierce down to help take off the crop this year. We had a really nice crop of durum, and he keeps talking about driving the combine and dumping DeVite. So it was a pretty special trip for him. But I graduated from a small town and came into the big city back in 2000. I didn't really know what I wanted to take, and so I started off in the College of Agriculture, pretty natural for a farm kid, and fell in love with history, and then from there kind of had a natural interest in law. So I went to the College of Law, graduated in 2005, and had a great experience, practiced for several years, did a grad degree in Osgoode Hall out east, and came back, practiced a little bit more before starting this business in about 2013. So it kind of skirted over about a decade of my life, which is kind of odd to do perhaps, but it feels like a lifetime ago. I was doing pretty traditional law jobs, working in law firms and working as a Crown prosecutor for a bit, and life is very, very different now. So we started our small Nano Brewery in 2015, opened the doors over by the farmers market, and have since gone through, I suppose, 2 expansions. We're just completing our second expansion. We've got a brewery over on 20th Street. It's still a Nano Brewery. We're brewing about 500 liters at a time, and we're pretty choosy as to where the beer goes and kind of what we are able to do in the brew house and that sort of thing. And had an opportunity before COVID hit to pursue an expansion project over just about a block away. And so we're adding a production facility and a canning facility just 5 years into running a business. So it's all been a bit of a whirlwind, and my hair was a lot darker 5 years ago. Law didn't do this to my face or my hair. I think small business did that, maybe being a dad too.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about me. I still pretty connected to the farm and certainly connected to Saskatchewan. I've I've lived in different places. I've lived in Toronto and Vancouver, and tried to, pursue interests in other places. And I just kept finding myself coming back to Saskatchewan, and this will be where we raise our family, and it's just a wonderful place to do business and to be engaged in your community.
That's awesome. That's great. Do you want to maybe take us to when you did start your brewery there? What was the craft beer scene like in Saskatchewan? I know since then it has become something completely different. So what was it like getting into the game when it was still so fresh?
Yeah, it's changed a lot. You know what? Maybe I'll go back even a little further. When we started home brewing, I inherited a winemaking kit. My dad had made choke cherry wine on it for years, and I just remembered that as a little guy. And then remember that it was at the farm. It had belonged to my great uncle Peter, and so my business partner Garrett and I decided to start making beer. I'm not really sure why. We traveled a bit together, and we had different types of beer. Back in those days, it was a real adventure to try to find interesting beer in Saskatchewan. Paddockwood was active, and really grateful for Paddockwood in a lot of ways. We were able, particularly Steve Cavan, a good teaching alumnus at the university. I'm not sure if his educational background's there, but taught classics for a number of years. Steve would host homebrewing classes at his brewery. We would experience Paddockwood beer, but we would also want to try making new beer, different types of beer, fresh IPAs and sours and stouts and stuff that you really had a hard time finding in Saskatchewan. And so we did that for about, I want to say 7 or 8 years before we took the plunge and started 9 Mile. And so in those years, there was Bushwhacker in Regina, and there was Paddockwood in Saskatoon. And there wasn't a heck of a lot else. Winston's had a really nice bottle menu, and so we would have a lot of fun finding interesting beer at Winston's. But in order to have interesting beer, we had to make it ourselves. And so, you fast forward a little bit, 2013, I'm progressing as one, I suppose, should at their law firm and knocking on the door of partnership. Garrett's doing the same thing over at the engineering firm he was working at. He's progressing well. And we realized that we either had to give this a try if we were going to do it, or just kind of get a little more satisfied in our careers and stop dreaming outside of that. And so really it was, it was something that the love of beer and the love of great beer and varietal beer really was the catalyst for Garrett and I to try something like this. I certainly wanted to try my hand at business and creating an organization and thinking strategically. That really moved me. Garrett, who has overseen our brewing operations from the start, really wanted to make beer commercially. And so at the time we were starting out, we really had to talk to people about what an IPA was, what a stout was, what a sour beer was. Like it just, the lexicon wasn't there in Saskatchewan. And for no big reason other than the fact that the beer scene hadn't developed. And so our theory all throughout planning this business was that Saskatchewan people, we're really smart people, practically smart. We can spot businesses that are faking it. We can spot products that are faking it. We appreciate quality things, and we appreciate quality people. And we thought that a craft industry was just so well suited to Saskatchewan. It just hadn't started. You now fast forward the tape, I suppose, almost 6 years from when we started. And the craft scene has proven us right. There's craft beer all over this province, and there's so many great producers. And now it's not so much trying to educate a customer on what a sour beer is or what an IPA is. It's trying to keep up with their demands and knowing that they want to have the latest and greatest thing. So today it's interesting. I've been very busy with our expansion project. Haven't gotten over to the tap room, but we've got a sour New England IPA on tap, which is a hazy late hop edition sour beer, which would have been unheard of in 2015. We would have really had to explain why the beer was cloudy, why it was sour. People would have assumed it was bad. They would have sent it back. Now, I don't know if I'll be able to try that beer because I didn't get over there today to give it a try. It'll be gone, I'm sure. So it has changed considerably, and I think it means a lot for our province from a couple of respects. Craft brewers use a lot more barley than large commercial brewers. I think the number is 6 to 1 in terms of barley inputs, and we've always very deliberately worked with Prairie Malt in Bigger and Maker's Malt in Rossler, 2 Saskatchewan-based maltsters. This means a lot for the farm gate, and it really matters, I think, to have well-made beer. I personally think craft beer tastes a lot better. I find I don't have as much a headache the next day, and that's because we're using really quality inputs and working hard to make good beer. And then the other thing I think that's really meaningful is the community impact that this industry is having. So, it's, I guess, two things, a macro thing and a micro thing. On the macro side, the economic spin-off from craft beer is outstanding. Our little brewery employs 14 people. We use lots of local suppliers. We pay lots of tax. We are investing in buildings in Riversdale. The economic spin-off is meaningful. I think in 2018, Economic Development Regina did a study on just Regina-based breweries, and I think the economic spin-off was something like $9 million or something like that. So from a macro perspective, it matters, right?
Yeah.
From a micro perspective, no pun intended, back in 2016 when we were advocating for changes to the rules around tap rooms, one of the really key things that we thought was meaningful was to allow kids to come in with their parents into our tap room. And it wasn't because we were being surreptitious and thinking that we were going to sell beer to minors or get them hooked early or anything like that. But it promotes responsible drinking, right? So in our tap room, you have parents with young kids that are able to come in and have a beer, and kids start to see responsible consumption from a very early age. And I think that's why our industry has the reputation of being a community hub as opposed to just your typical pub, so I think there's a lot of ways that drinking has changed in the province in those last 6 years. The craft industry certainly has changed in terms of variety. And I think back to how we would special order beer in from SLGA or have to, it was kind of before Twitter. This is the gray hair, right? Like I guess it's been a while. But you kind of let your friends know where good beer might be located and you'd seek it out. Now it's really just challenging to not find good beer, which is a really nice development.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, you covered a lot there, but that's so true. And like I mentioned, you do walk into your guys' tap room and have seen kids there and people playing crib, playing cards, and I think that's also, it speaks to your guys' industry. It's a lot about community, and it's a lot about getting together and just getting a good product in. So it's just interesting to see how the industry has changed over the past 10 years and right, how Saskatchewan has really been involved with it and seen it grow. So I guess the next question I have for you, we might be shifting gears a little bit, but you kind of talked about where you guys were and the success that you guys were seeing with your tap room and the different beers on tap. You had specialty beers out. I know you did a collaboration with our friends at Odd Couple across the street, and you had Blades beer, and I think you had a Juno beer coming out. So you guys were really into it.
Another great alumni business. I'll just shamelessly plug our friends Andy and Rachel, who are. Andy certainly is a graduate of the College of Engineering. I'm not sure if Rach graduated up here or down in Regina, but support an alumni business across the street. They're good friends.
Totally. Yeah, you can wave to them across the window from where you guys are. So great.
Yeah.
Have a thing of noodles and a thing of beer, and you're good to go. Just like things like that, right? You guys are just so connected with the community. From an outsider's point, it just looked like it was so successful. And then I just want to bring it to March 2020, which seems to be kind of the doomsday for a lot of people. But COVID did hit, right? And we did hear the news that we all had to shut down. We all had to self-isolate. I don't know. It's hard and it's heavy. I know when we chatted kind of prior to this, you had that line that said, "Of course, it's pretty heavy. Everything's pretty heavy right now." But if you could, can you just maybe take us through those days when you heard that your successful business had to maybe be locked down for a bit, and as a business owner, how did you work around that, and how did you get through it?
It was interesting. I think from a broad perspective, I often wrestle with what we actually sell, and that might seem like a really weird question because the obvious response is, well, you sell beer, but I think it's a little more nuanced than that. I think people choose to support our business certainly because we make high quality award-winning beer, but it's a really good conduit for connecting with someone. There's no better way to get into a good discussion than over a glass of beer. And it's the sort of drink that's really accessible to people. It's not like fancy wine or expensive scotch. It's everybody can afford a beer and everybody can learn to appreciate a beer. It becomes really hard when no one can go out, right? And so I think more so than certainly the public health order and the overarching safety concerns were really challenging to figure out. And we're still figuring it out, and I'm sure all of us are still figuring it out. And I am like a pendulum to where I think that everything is extremely serious and need to continue to be locked down and secure to, is it real in Saskatchewan? You know, we're doing such a good job here. Is it actually something where we need to be really aggressive with our economy? And I admittedly wrestle with that sometimes. We've always taken a safety first approach throughout the COVID period, and I think that's the right thing to do. But it was this time that really caused you to think hard about having actual sales channels shut down. But from a philosophical perspective, thinking that what you do is connect people, and now you're told that you have to be home, makes you question your business, right? We had, leading into March, so of course I'll get to the Juno project because that was a really interesting part of it, but 2020 was shaping up to be one heck of a year for us. Garrett and I had, it's challenging as a small business owner. For 4 years, pretty well every January, February, March, we would hold our breath financially so that we could keep people employed. We're small business owners. It's a seasonal business. This was part of it. 2020 was the first year where we didn't have to do that. We had grown to the point where our taproom was functioning really well. We had a really good commercial base of clients. We had this expansion project queued up. We'd had financing approval. We'd signed a lease. We had negotiated new contracts with our staff. And we had procured equipment to start. All we were waiting for was zoning approval from the city. And so that was kind of where we were in February. The Junos was the next month. We had, I think, about 8 activation points at the Junos. Our beer was going to the hockey game. We were on the red carpet. We had designed a special growler and kind of put our 999th batch of beer in the growler. That's how we were going to release it. And it was the centerpiece of the banquet. We were really excited about that. And then the other thing that was happening is we had finally executed a collaboration with the Saskatoon Blades who were shaping up for what we think, and we still think it would have been a long playoff run. But we had a project with them where we did a special Blades beer, and we had released this really cool package where you could book a box at the Blades, come down to the tap room, we would feed you great Odd Couple food, send you in a limo out to the Blades game where you'd enjoy more 9 Mile beer, and then you'd come back to the tap room. So all of the stars were aligning for us, right? March 11th, I remember I was watching basketball, big basketball nut, and Rudy Gobert of the Utah Jazz is announced that he's COVID positive, and the NBA shuts down. And you start to see all of these dominoes fall all across the world. And the next day, I remember going to bed thinking, well, the Junos is going to be canceled. And I was in kind of on the inside of some of those discussions, and I fully support the decision. It was the right decision. I think Rudy Gobert may have saved Saskatoon, Saskatchewan in some ways. Like it was, the timing was such, we were about to welcome the entire country. And so that happens over the weekend, and we are trying to figure out what to do. We make the decision. We had all of this Juno beer sitting there. It was already bottled. It was useless. We didn't really feel like we could sell it from the perspective of, it felt a little bit like making money off of a bad situation. They weren't supposed to be sold. They were supposed to be these collector item centerpieces. I came across a post online that the Friendship Inn was also having to pivot from, which is, for people that don't know, a really important soup kitchen in the inner city in Saskatoon, and was having to pivot from on-site meals to takeaway meals, and we're trying to raise money. It was kind of a desperate call for help in a sense. And just thought that, well, maybe we can make some good out of this. Not that we were going to raise a pile of money. We raised $3,000. We gave every single cent of that we brought in for those 100 growlers. We sold them for $30 a piece. People bought them. It was kind of cool. But more to the point, I thought that certainly the Friendship Inn could use the cash. I hoped it would get people thinking a little bit about how we needed to look out for each other through this period. But also people needed stories. Like, this isn't going to be the end of us at all. And at the time, I think a lot of us were wondering whether it was going to be, right? We weren't sure we were going to live, let alone what things were going to look like on the other side. And so I just felt that people needed to be reminded that in Saskatchewan, and whether you're from the province or you come into the province and you learn in the province like alumni do, we're resilient people. We know how to survive together, and we don't need to forget those lessons just because we have this pandemic. And so it was a really important part, of the early time, and we got some interesting attention, which I was really grateful for, not from a business perspective, but because I think it spurred on, different behavior from a philanthropic perspective. and then March 16th, the day before St. Patrick's Day, we decided to close our tap room. So it was, St. Patrick's Day is like Christmas for a brewery. You sell a lot of beer, and we always have a really raucous tap room, and we decided to close it on the 16th. That day, we saw 90% of our business vanish overnight. We, at that point in our life cycle, we had a little bit of bottles, but most of our beer was sold in the tap room and at draft clients. And so all of our clients started to follow suit. And that week we saw it all vanish. And so we kind of had to figure out how to convert what we do into something that would be COVID resilient. So.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I remember that when you guys closed, I was following you on Instagram, and I have Irish roots too. So it was really sad to see you guys close the day before St. Patrick's Day. I think that was like a real game changer for a lot of us, that this was real life. But
I think I bought a bottle of whiskey and stayed home, Leslie Ann, so it worked out fine for me. But yeah, it was, one of those things where you existential. No one knows existential dread like the Irish.
Oh,
so
right.
It worked out okay.
It's in our blood, right?
Yeah.
But no, and then on that note, I know that you're resilient in all those changes, and we use the word pivot a lot, but you did have to pivot, because like you said, 90% of your guys' sales were done overnight. And what was interesting with you guys, and what I want to chat a little bit more about, is that virtual tap room and how you guys transitioned into that, because I think that was just such a great example of how resilient you could be in these times. So you just want to take us a little through that process and what that was like?
Yeah, it was the sort of thing where, we still had a brewery, and we still had some really talented people. We actually, I think I mentioned this to you before, but we employ a lot of U of S current students who are alumni, and so we ended up, our roster of taproom crew, our casual taproom crew, was pretty well mostly grad students. So we had a PhD candidate in evolutionary biology, a microbiology student, a couple of public health master's students, a law student. And so we kind of looked around us, and it's 10% of the business is left. We still have the gear to make beer. We have to find our clients, and we got to stick by our people. And so that was first and foremost. That when I think back on the core principles that we had, it was essentially, I'm trying to turn my mind back. It feels so long ago, but it was. What we do is important. So that was the first principle. We still have a role to play, and it felt a little funny early on thinking about a brewery as an essential service, but happiness is important, right? I think I shared the Voltaire quote with you when we last talked, but when the ship is sinking, it's still important to sing in the lifeboats, and we firmly believe that people need to be comfortable. They need to be happy so that we can comply with the public health order and keep it together. And we did in this province. So that was the first thing. We need to figure out how we do what we do. What we do is important. Second was we have to do it safely. We have to prioritize the safety of our staff and the general public at all times. So you can't really do the first without doing the second. It was an important qualifier. And then the third was to provide cover fire for our people. I don't want my people going home and worrying about whether or not they can pay rent. And so this was all very fast moving. It was a time before any government supports. We've been very grateful to be able to use the emergency wage subsidy. That's been very useful to us, along with other supports. We've been very grateful to have good financial institutions backing our play. It was fortunate we were engaged in this project, because if everything shut down, we had work for people, and we were already in growth mode. So the partners that we had in FCC and Connexus were super important. But it didn't really solve the question. If we need to figure out how to get beer to people, we need to do it safely, and we need to protect our people, we have to reinvent the business. And so we started off just taking email orders, and it almost killed our sales team, I think, just staying up all night and phone calls and emails. And we were now this delivery fleet. I think of the taxis in Britain. It's overplaying it, certainly, but getting out there and getting the beer to the people, making sure the people are comfortable. And I remember in those early days, the best job in the brewery was home deliveries, because you'd go there and you'd end up having these conversations through somebody's window. And you felt as though you were really throwing them a lifeline. But it wasn't sustainable. We had been trying to think about how to reimagine our business for several years. And we're thinking about what our digital ecosystem needed to look like. And so had a plan to develop a virtual tap room, the virtual 9 Mile experience, essentially, and dreaming big as to what that could be. It could involve exclusive interaction with us. It could involve games, an online store, lots of different things. The ideas were boundless, really. We didn't have any time for that, obviously. We had to get selling beer. And so we had started working on this with Zoo Communications and Lawrence Nicolette, another great Husky alumni. It is a theme throughout all of this story, I think. Lots of good U of S grads are lending a hand to each other. But Zoo stepped up to the plate. I called Lawrence 8:30 on a Sunday night. I'd been having a barbecue, and one of my friends really pushed me to get moving on the online store. And so I called Lawrence, and they got to work. And it launched our virtual tap room. And so we had been approached by other people in industry. Other people were doing the virtual online sales, and they asked if we wanted to sell our beer through those networks. And really, it was a non-starter for us, because if we were going to do that, we'd be selling all of our beer at wholesale. We wouldn't have any margin. We'd have to say goodbye to our people. So when you go through the principles, it's not going to work for you, right? So we developed a pretty comprehensive online store. Lawrence will correct me, and he may even be on this, but in 2.5 weeks or something stupid like that. It was just insane. And we toyed with whether we just take a platform off the shelf, but this was part of a broader vision, continues to be part of a broader vision, and Zoo is up to the task of imagining that. So, we decided it was the right time, I think, both on the physical expansion and the virtual expansion, to double down and it's not be too dissuaded by a pandemic, a little thing like a pandemic to stop your plans. So I think rather than scrap our strategic plan, we accelerated a number of portions of it.
Yeah, and that's great. And maybe that's something we can touch on too, is just the success. Like you had mentioned that you guys have that virtual tap room now. I've been on it. It's easy. I think we've all used, you mentioned something called a digital ecosystem, and isn't that true? That's what we're living in, even right now, like just trying to figure out how to log in and all that stuff. Like we're in this new world. And then also a little bit about the expansion project that you guys are doing, so you can get, cans of beer into our hands a little easier. It seems like it's going really well for you guys.
Yeah, I think we're a week or two away actually from commissioning the thing, which has been great. We probably lost a month in terms of timeline, but we're going to come in under budget. I think it's been really quite successful. We just need to get the beer moving now, and so at this point in expansion, you've been cutting a lot of checks. You need to start seeing some revenue come in. But it's been very successful, I think, and it's a great building. It's great to kind of give us a bit more of a comfortable home for anyone who's been in the back of the other brewery. It's very small, and it's just not conducive to having a really good, thoughtful commercial space. So we're very excited about that.
That's awesome. That's so great. And I think I hate, we might be running out of time here. So I had lots of questions for you, Shawn, but we touched on a lot of them. One that I did want to touch on before we start getting into our polls and our Q&A and stuff here, just about your experience at USask and how you think that has kind of contributed to where you are today in terms of your resiliency, in terms of your community mindedness. I know you've touched on that throughout our talk a little bit here, but just kind of bring up whenever we talk. I'm wondering how that kind of plays into it.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think there's certainly subject matter competence that played into it. And what I mean by that is legal training has been very helpful in starting a business. I've had to reprogram several aspects of my training because, being a lawyer isn't necessarily the best in an organization. You can be very strategic and you can be very thoughtful and detailed, but some of the softer skills, I found out very quickly that being a lawyer CEO just doesn't necessarily work. So you gotta massage some of that stuff. But lots of good training. But I think more than anything, and maybe I don't reflect on this enough, but being from Saskatchewan and being trained in Saskatchewan, you're just hardwired to be a good neighbor. And I think that's probably something that all of us learn at the U of S, and I think it's just been kind of hardwired into my DNA from the start. And so when I think about what it means to be a good neighbor, that permeates throughout my team at 9 Mile. It permeates with my suppliers and my clients. It permeates with the people in Riversdale that pre-existed us showing up. We're very new to Riversdale. Riversdale's been around for 100 years. There's lots of people that have been here a lot longer than us, and we owe it to them to be good neighbors too.
That's great. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head on that one for sure. And I have to ask this, maybe closing kind of our chat portion of this. It's kind of like asking a parent who your favorite kid is. But
Right.
if you had a favorite beer, I mean, you only have one kid. I have two, so don't ask me that question. But
No.
if you had to pick a favorite beer of all the beers that you guys have created in your tenure, what would you pick, or what would you recommend to us tonight?
It's beer. I find beer to be very context-based. So the beer I'm drinking right now is Sunnyside. Keep on the Sunnyside. It's a Berliner Weiss. It's 3%. Nice and tart. Cam Broten of Sask called us in the pandemic and said, "How can we help?" I said, "Well, I have no idea. We're not going to make a beer out of eggs." And he's like, "No. What if we made a breakfast beer?" And so that's what we did. This was designed when everybody was brunching at home. At 3%, it's not going to knock you off your socks, and I just like it. I'm not a big drinker. That's maybe a surprising thing for someone who owns a brewery. I like the taste of beer. A 3% beer is really nice, and it's nice and tart on a hot day. But so that's what I'm drinking now. My favorite beer all time is probably our 9 Mile Ale. It was the first homebrew beer that we brewed, which is what you're drinking. It won a gold medal last year in national competition. It was the first beer we bottled. It was probably the first beer that we brewed at our original brewery. So it's a really near and dear style to us, and it was really nice to get it recognized officially. And so the award ceremony that we were at last year is on tomorrow night. It's going to be live streamed, and we've submitted a few beer, and so we'll be watching keenly to see if we took any hardware this year again.
Oh, awesome. I look forward to seeing those results.
Yeah, me too.
So I guess now we're going to play around with another poll here, guys. If you're into it, we're going to open up that question to you. And if you have a favorite 9 Mile beer, feel free to let us know. I think on the side, yep, there's my cue. Good job, guys. I think we have a selection there. We took a couple off your website there, Shawn. So you guys have those to play with. I'll say mine definitely is the 9 Mile Ale. I'm kind of original.
Really?
We're not too adventurous, but it's just exactly what you need. It's always sweet and mild. And
we always thought that beer it was kind of designed to be your second to ninth beer. You go for something a little bit weird for the first beer, but then you want something really reliable after that.
Right. Yep, that's true. I have some of the poll results to see where everybody came from. We have a few from Ag Bio, so there you go. Arts and Science, Education, Edwards Engineering, Vet Med, Law, Graduate, and Postdoctoral. So we have a good array of our alum here. Oh, here's I don't know if you guys can see those answers on the side. But yeah, there's quite a few of you, lots from engineering, which is great.
I see 1 out of 56 is from law, so I'm assuming that's me.
It's not me.
Not you.
And no answers, a couple too there, so that's great. And I think we do have a little bit of time here for a Q&A. I don't know if any questions did come in.
I saw a question about malt production in Rosthern, and yeah, I don't know. It's from Derek. I'm going to mispronounce your last name, Derek Thiel in Winnipeg. Used to live there. It's the Enns family. So Elmer Enns and his son Matt and a few other farmers own that facility. It's called Maker's Malt. And it's really nice for us because it's a vertically integrated operation, which means we can identify the field that produced the barley that's in our beer. And so it's been a real delight for us to take beer back to the Rosthern area and give it to the farmers that grew it. Where else in the world can you do that? It's just a wonderful thing that we can do in Saskatchewan because we grow the best darn barley, in the entire world. So we should be making the best beer out of it too. So I think that's the only one I saw. I guess Derek also asked a question, or not a question, but he said he's drinking Great West in Winnipeg, and that might be the only beer in Manitoba from Saskatchewan. I just say stay tuned, Derek. You never know. You never know.
There was, I know I talked to the guys from the malt makers on that green and white story, and it was so interesting because that story was about how we had researched the barley that went to the malt that ended up in your guys' facility, and then within a 20-kilometer radius, you created this beer from start to finish. And I think that's a great example of everything.
And that's an industry. We're also starting to see hop growers pop up in Saskatchewan. These are industries that don't exist without the craft beer industry. It's Makers has probably been around for 2 or 3 years. The industry is really, I would say, the second wave of the industry has been around for about 6. So it's really cool to see investment in other aspects of the ag value chain. Dad and I laugh because Dad's still farming, and for a number of years ago, I went away to school and left the farm, so to speak. I think much to his chagrin, but I'm back in ag value, in a different way, and it's just a kind of a neat thing. One of my favorite books throughout university is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And it's a really nice story about trying to figure out what your personal legend is. And at the end of the story, the protagonist ends up back at home after having learned a whole bunch about himself. And I feel that way about our business and, and about my career path, which was pretty weird.
Yeah, that resonates. One question that came in here is what's some advice you'd give to new grads who graduate in this world?
Yeah, I get asked this question a lot, and I always come in awe. I don't feel very qualified to give advice on that stuff, but I do think that we get very focused on the end of the journey when we're trying to figure out what to do with our lives, and we get very stressed by that, right? There's lots of pressure to tick boxes, and there's lots of pressure to actualize on ideas that you might have about yourself, and we sometimes forget about the journey. And I did a lot of really interesting stuff in my legal career, and I'm having a lot of fun running a brewery. And there were times I think where I sprinted through that, and I should have just sat and taken a breath and enjoyed it. And so I think that's the advice I would give. Is it's trite, but life goes so quickly. You know what having kids, Leslie Ann, it's long nights and short decades, right?
Yeah, something like that.
You got to drink it in, and because it's wonderful. Life is wonderful. The pandemic didn't change any of that, right? There's so much beautiful stuff that happened throughout this period. People were spending more time with their families. We were starting to bike more. We were starting to just appreciate each other a little bit more, and that stuff needs to be sticky. And I think for new grads or people just arriving at university, definitely take time and be patient and enjoy it.
That's good advice. Good advice for all of us, not just new grads too, hey? I think we might have time for one more question, maybe a couple more questions here. Doug asked, are there any plans to give rider fans in Alberta the opportunity to buy good beer from 9 Mile? So similar to
and Doug, to you, I'd say hang tight. We're working on it. We'll commission this new facility very shortly. It's such a wonderful building. It was originally Miller Hatcheries. It was a chick hatchery, which means it's well suited with floor drains, lots of space. We'll be able to grow, and I'm hoping we'll be able to get out of the province with some of our great beer too.
That's awesome. That's so great. I'm just checking to see if there's any more.
While you're looking, I'll just shout out to Mark Brew, who is also an alumni, BEd 92, and a fellow craft brewery owner. Mark, that screams a collab. I gotta say we gotta link up at some point when we can do so, because what a great thing to have another USask alumni in the craft beer industry. Cheers to you. Yeah.
That's great. That's so awesome. And we had another question from Dave about when coming to Ontario.
And what a last name, Leslie Ann. Mark Brew, who's a brewer. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
You can't write that. That's just it's just you're destined for your career. It's another question about getting beer in Ontario. Everybody wants your beer.
That's good. No, we appreciate that. We'll just ask for a little bit of patience, but we'll work hard at that.
That's so great. So great. Well, thank you guys. I think maybe now we can throw the poll about the beer. I don't know if we're able to do that. If polling wants to show us who was our favorite beer. I don't know if we're able to do that now, or you can do that on the back end. Do some market research for you, Shawn. Oh, there we go.
Looks like we got to get beer into more people's hands. So
well, we have some 9 Mile ales. I think that's the front runner. So there you go. Some original guys with me on that. The sour, is a front runner too. So there you go. Yeah, awesome. That's so great. So yeah, I'm just a little bit mindful of our time here, and I think we should maybe wrap it up. I can't believe that our chat seemed like that was 2 minutes. Jeez Louise. I wanted to thank you, Shawn, so much for being with us here tonight. I know you are so busy. You're expanding right now. You're dealing with
my pleasure.
It was just so great to talk to you. And like I had said throughout this all, you're just such a great representation of what who our alumni are. And I think your inspiring story is what we need in these uncertain times. I know everybody keeps saying these uncertain times, but it's true. It's nice to hear a boost of positivity every once in a while. So we really do appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate everyone joining us, and it's great to be part of this alumnus network. So yeah, thanks everyone.
It's great to have you a part of it too. And I'll just close on saying thanks to our tech team. I know, again, we talked about our digital world, and it's all new for us too, so we really appreciate them helping us out. And a big thank you to everybody who logged in tonight. Like Chris Unsworth kind of mentioned at the beginning, I have the best job in the world. I get to talk to you guys every day and tell your stories. And what kind of better thing to do than just talk to amazing USask alumni who inspire me daily. And you all are really and truly the backbone of our university. And it's been such a great week, this alumni week, being able to connect with a lot of you. We've seen so much interaction with our alumni on our Facebook and our Instagram page. And in this virtual world, you guys are still stepping up and showing up, and that's so great to see. So I'll just let you know there's still time to check out some of our stuff. We have one more day of alumni week left. Head over to alumni.usask.ca. There's prizes, games, contests, all that kind of fun stuff. So with that, I'm going to do a final cheers. Thanks so much, everybody, for participating tonight. It was so much fun, and we hope to see you next year as well.
Cheers, everyone. Thanks. Yep.